I had gone through 50 years of trials and hardships with my husband, and only on my deathbed did I learn that the sickly son I had raised with my own hands was actually the illegitimate child of his mistress. My husband, Andrew Sullivan, and I had been through thick and thin for 50 years. We had a pair of twins, a boy and a girl. Our son had been frail and sickly since childhood. I poured all my energy into caring for him, painstakingly raising him, and as a result, I had unintentionally neglected our daughter. Now, I lay on a hospital bed. The doctor beside me urged my family to make a decision, saying my condition was critical and surgery needed to be done immediately. If the surgery was performed, I had a good chance of survival. My lips were dry and cracked, my throat unable to make a sound, but I looked toward my husband with hope. Being a doctor myself, I knew that if I had the operation, I could live at least another 10 years. While Andrew hesitated, my cousin Melissa walked into the room with our son Jason. Jason's face was filled with sorrow as he turned to the doctor and said, "We've decided to stop treatment. We don't want Mom to suffer anymore." The doctor sighed helplessly and walked away. This son, who had been sickly since he was little, whom I had carried to hospitals all across the country for treatment, was now abandoning me over just tens of thousands of dollars in surgical fees. My heart had never hurt so much. Then, Melissa came to my bedside. Melissa leaned in close to my ear and whispered, "Claire, to thank you, I'll tell you a secret before you die. Jason is actually my son. Back then, you only gave birth to a daughter. To fulfill your wish of having both a son and a daughter, Andrew lied to you and told you that you had twins. Who would have thought you'd care so deeply for that sickly child, giving everything to treat his illnesses? I'm telling you this out of gratitude, so you can die with clarity. Strictly speaking, my son is actually 3 days older than your daughter." My eyes widened in disbelief. I had sacrificed my healthy daughter for the sake of this frail son. My mother-in-law had been the one to raise my daughter. Once, when I took Jason out of town to see a doctor, my daughter had accidentally fallen into a river. A sharp stone in the water had cut her cheek, but my mother-in-law didn't take her to the hospital. By the time I got back, her wound had become infected and was oozing pus. Though we eventually cured the infection, it left a deep scar. My once cheerful and outgoing daughter became timid and withdrawn, refusing to go outside. With the last of my strength, I bit down on my lip, using the pain to etch the hatred of this life into my memory. If I ever had another life, I would never marry that man again. When I opened my eyes again, I had returned to 3 days before my wedding. My house was full of people helping to prepare my dowry. In our local custom, the dowry was sent 3 days before the wedding, but the groom had to come personally to escort it. A tradition called welcoming fortune. But just like in my previous life, Andrew didn't show up. Melissa had said her son was 3 days older than my daughter. In my last life, the day after I married Andrew, he returned to the military. A month later, I found out I was pregnant. That meant, on this very day in my past life, he had been with Melissa. The thought made me sick to my stomach. After I got pregnant in that life, Melissa disappeared. I didn't see her again until Jason's 1-month birthday celebration. Andrew's family wasn't well off. His parents were farmers through and through. He had 2 younger brothers and a younger sister. He wasn't particularly capable, just diligent. If it hadn't been for the support of my uncles, there was no way he could have climbed the ranks so quickly in his career. Melissa was my uncle's daughter, a year older than me. Her mother had always favored boys, so Melissa never had good clothes or food growing up. Honestly, everything I had, my clothes, food, even the dowry now, was thanks to my uncle's support. Melissa had always loved to compare herself to me. Whatever I had, she wanted, including, it seemed, my man. Well, if that's what she wanted, she could have him. As I watched the cart loaded with my dowry about to head out, I quickly shouted, "Wait a second!" My voice made the folks around me stop in their tracks. Since Andrew Sullivan didn't even have time to come escort the dowry, then there was no need to send it. I wasn't going to marry him. Everyone around me looked at one another in shock. In our hometown, if the groom didn't personally come to escort the dowry, it was a sign of disrespect toward the bride. In my previous life, I had thought these things didn't matter. I didn't care about the gossip or the opinions of the neighbors. Just then, one of the aunts stepped forward and praised me. "Good girl, you've come to your senses. I knew you weren't that foolish. What kind of groom doesn't show up to escort the dowry? Not doing so means he doesn't value you. That's how it's always been." But my aunt-in-law, from my uncle's side, objected. "The dowry's already packed onto the cart, just send it over. What's the point of fussing over old customs?" She had said the same thing in my previous life. Back then I never saw a single cent of Andrew's military stipend. My uncle's whole family was lazy and greedy, yet they lived well. Looking back now, it's not hard to see why they were doing so well in that life. That same aunt was already speaking up in Andrew's defense. She'd probably already gained some benefit from him. My dad looked conflicted. "The banquet is already prepared, and everything for the wedding is ready. Claire, marriage isn't child's play." "Dad, I know marriage isn't a game," I replied. "That's exactly why I'm ending it before anything worse happens." Before he could say more, my mom smacked his arm. "He doesn't even want to come pick up the dowry? What could possibly be so important that he has no time for that? Forget it. If my daughter says she's not getting married, then she's not getting married." Her support brought tears to my eyes. In my last life, I'd been so preoccupied with that illegitimate son's illness that I never had time to care for my parents. My mom even had to help cover his medical expenses. I had spent every penny I had on his treatments, leaving me unable to work and eventually taking early, unpaid leave. When my mom fell seriously ill, I was still running around a hospital in the capital for someone else's child. By the time she passed, I was still on the train home. I never even got to say goodbye. I held my mom tightly, my voice choked. "Mom, I'm so sorry." She stroked my back gently. "Silly girl, marriage lasts a lifetime. You've got nothing to apologize for. As long as you've thought it through, that's all that matters." But my grandmother was clearly unhappy. "You've been engaged for years. Now you want to call off the wedding the day before? Look at you, not nearly as sensible as little Melissa. Breaking off the engagement now makes you a second-hand bride. Who would want you in the future?" My grandmother had always been blatantly biased toward my uncle's family. The truth was, my uncle wasn't even my father's real brother. He and his son had been brought into the family from my grandmother's side. In my past life, my mother died early, and she couldn't have escaped that woman's torment. My grandmother had made my mom do all the housework and never allowed them to split the household. My uncle's family had already separated and married off their children, yet my grandmother continued to give them support. Not that my uncle had any income of his own, the money he gave out was all taken from what my dad and second uncle turned in. My grandmother had raised all three of my uncle's kids like they were precious. As for me and my brother, she barely looked at us. My grandfather tapped his pipe and said to her, "Stay out of this. Claire's parents have the final say. We have no right to interfere." But my grandmother exploded. "They haven't separated the family yet, so I do have the right to interfere. Send the dowry, now. Move it, move it. Then let's split the family." It was the first time in both my lives that I saw my mom talk back to my grandmother. My grandmother froze for a moment, then grabbed a willow switch and went to hit my mom. "You wretched woman, still daring to talk back to me?" I grabbed the switch and threw it to the ground. My grandmother lunged at me, but I ignored her. She quickly hid behind my grandfather. I looked straight at him and said, "Grandpa, I just don't understand. Why has Grandma always favored Uncle's family? All my cousins were raised by her. All the money my dad and Uncle Daniel earned went to support Uncle Mike. Ever since they were little, my dad and Uncle Daniel were told to give in to their older brother. But tell me, Grandpa, since when is it the younger brothers who must always sacrifice for the elder one? Is that what you call love by association?" My grandfather had been a teacher in the village. He understood the phrase, love by association. Maybe most rural folks didn't get it, but he definitely did. His face immediately changed. I knew this was the thorn that had always been stuck in Grandpa's heart. In my previous life, I had once overheard Grandpa and Grandma arguing. She had screamed at him, calling him useless, accusing him of not being able to give her a good life. Grandpa snapped back, telling her to go find her dead ex-husband. No matter how capable he had been, he was long gone. Grandpa had never been okay with how blatantly biased Grandma was. He had wanted to split the family long ago. He was angry that the money his own sons earned was being used to support someone else's child. But every time, Grandma would cry, throw tantrums, threaten to hang herself. Grandpa, a former village schoolteacher who cared deeply about his pride and reputation, didn't want to turn it into a public spectacle. So he kept swallowing his frustration, again and again. Grandma was a typical rural woman. She didn't even understand half of what I had just said. "Claire, you silly girl, so what if I favor your Uncle Mike? He's good-looking, smart, and respectful. Not like your dad, your Uncle Daniel, or even your grandpa. All they do is bury their heads and work like fools." That woman really had no filter. She just added fuel to Grandpa's fire, insulting him right in front of everyone. "Enough." Grandpa stood up. "Since you think Mike is so perfect, then fine. Let's split the family. You can go live with him after the separation." Grandma was stunned. She hadn't expected Grandpa to actually say it out loud. "I'm just doing this for the good of the whole family in our later years. Breaking off an engagement like this, she'll be seen as a second-hand bride. Who would want her?" "And what about Mike, huh?" Grandpa shot back. "What does that make him? A man who fathered a child before marriage." Grandpa didn't spare her feelings. Grandma had never even been officially married to Mike's father. That truth had been buried for years, and now Grandpa had torn the mask right off in front of everyone. For the first time, he openly exposed her secret about bringing Uncle Mike and his father into the family. Grandma couldn't handle the shame and immediately began to cry. Just as I was about to push things further, Andrew Sullivan's parents barged into the courtyard. I didn't know who had tipped them off, but Mrs. Sullivan rushed over to grab my hand. "Claire, sweetheart, your aunt knows this was all Andrew's fault. I've already sent his uncles to look for him. Please don't worry, he's just being impulsive. What a stupid boy. I promise you, I won't let him off easy. A wedding is a huge deal. You can't just act on emotions." I gave her a small smile, though in my mind all I could see was the image of her yelling at and beating my daughter in my previous life. "Aunt," I said calmly, "if Andrew doesn't want to marry, then don't force him." Suddenly, something I had forgotten came back to me. Something very important. Melissa couldn't marry Andrew unless he left the military. Her grandfather had once been classified as a political criminal. Her grandmother had taken her mother to live in the countryside for years, barely escaping further punishment. Eventually, they had to publicly sever ties with him in the papers to survive. Even so, Melissa would never pass the political vetting process. No wonder she had lived her whole life hiding in secrecy in my previous life. I had been nothing but a convenient cover for them. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I spotted a familiar face in the crowd. Nathan Foster. In my last life, after I got engaged, he ended up marrying the daughter of the village chief from the next town over, Lillian Cox. He had been pressured into it. Lillian used her father's status to force the marriage. Nathan's family had once been landlords and were harshly discriminated against in the village. If he didn't marry her, his younger siblings wouldn't even be allowed to attend school. He didn't want them to be trapped in that life forever. Even though college entrance exams had been canceled for years, he still believed that education would change their fate. After the marriage, Lillian was constantly jealous and suspicious. She accused Nathan of cheating on her every other day, mostly because he was, admittedly, very handsome. Even when he passed by middle-aged women in the village, he had to cross the street to avoid being seen with them, or she'd chase them down and curse them out. I had been cursed at too. My daughter had fallen into the river once, and Nathan was the one who jumped in and pulled her out. When I came back and brought a gift to thank him, Lillian screamed at me until I left in embarrassment. Another time, my dad fell while gathering firewood on the mountain and broke his leg. Nathan carried him all the way down by himself. I got cursed again, right in my own home. My mom had once told me that, before my engagement to Andrew, Nathan's father had quietly proposed marriage between me and Nathan. But my mom turned him down, thinking their family background was too risky. Years later, one of Nathan's friends told me that Nathan had always liked me. "Nathan Foster," I called out to him. He froze, stunned. For a second, he looked like he thought he was imagining things. Nathan Foster, would you be willing to marry me? The words exploded into the courtyard like a bolt of lightning, throwing everything into chaos. After the explosion of noise, the courtyard fell completely silent. My mom marched over and pinched me hard. "You crazy girl, what are you doing?" My dad also grabbed my arm, flustered. "Claire, don't talk nonsense." I shook them both off and walked straight over to Nathan Foster, who looked completely stunned. "I'm asking you one last time," I said, standing in front of him. "Will you marry me?" It was like something suddenly snapped him out of a daze. His eyes turned red and his lips trembled. "I will," he said, voice shaking from emotion. "I will." I turned to my mom, smiling. "I want to marry Nathan Foster. Go ahead and deliver the dowry." My grandfather was holding his chest, trying to calm his breathing. I knew he loved me. I rushed to his side and whispered, "Grandpa, Nathan has liked me for many years. I never agreed before. His family background might not be ideal, but he's capable, and he's not a player." I lowered my voice even more. "Grandpa, I know the broken engagement will affect my reputation, but I'll tell you the truth. The real reason I'm breaking it off is because Andrew Sullivan has been secretly involved with my cousin Melissa. I kept quiet today to save face for our family." Grandpa looked at me, shocked. But I knew he trusted me. He had always cherished me. Melissa was Uncle Mike's daughter. Grandpa had never liked her much to begin with. He paused for a moment, then nodded. "All right." Then he looked at me, pained. "Claire, I'm sorry. We'll divide the household tomorrow. Your dad and your Uncle Daniel won't have to keep giving anymore." I hugged him tight. "Grandpa, I'll take care of you when you're old." He smiled and patted my head gently. Then he tapped his pipe and looked sternly at Nathan. "Young man, you better treat Claire right." Nathan nodded so fast it looked like his head might fall off. "Deliver the dowry," Grandpa commanded. The courtyard erupted in activity once again. Grandma, fuming, slammed the door and stormed into the house. Aunt Judy, pale as a ghost, staggered away toward home. Andrew's parents were spinning in circles with panic. Mrs. Sullivan tried to grab my mom's hand again, but she shook her off. When they tried to stop the dowry cart, the neighboring women who had been enjoying the drama stepped in to block them. With drums and flutes playing, the dowry procession set out. Nathan walked as if he were floating, as though the whole thing still didn't feel real. When we arrived at Nathan's house, his parents were still inside sorting beans. "Mom, Dad," he said, grinning, "I'm getting married the day after tomorrow. Today's the dowry delivery." Beans spilled across the floor with a loud whoosh. His parents were stunned for only a second before tears began to stream down their faces. They immediately rushed inside to make space for the dowry. I actually had quite a lot in my dowry. I had 3 uncles, 2 in the military and 1 the director of the local supply co-op. My mom was their only sister, and they adored her, though they were also frustrated with how passive and soft-hearted she'd always been. Because Andrew's family had been so poor, my uncles had pooled their money to give me a lavish dowry, 3 spinning wheels and a full set of 72-legged furniture. At the time, Andrew's parents had shown off a lot about it in the village. After everything was unloaded and settled, I asked Nathan to ride one of the bicycles from the dowry and take me to the township office to make a phone call. The road was bumpy, and I sat behind him, wrapping my arms around his waist. The coarse fabric of his shirt rubbed against my palms, but I could feel the solid muscle beneath his skin. As he pedaled, his back rose and fell, the scent of sweat and soap clinging to him. We hit a rut, and I jolted forward, my forehead bumping into his hot back. He turned his head and chuckled softly. I felt the vibration from his Adam's apple travel through his spine and into my fingertips. "Hold on tight," he said. I leaned in, pressing my face into his back. I could feel the tension in his body at that moment. The sound of the bike chain clicking, the rhythm of his deepening breath. Somehow, this bumpy dirt road felt just right. When we reached the township office, the signal tower gleamed red in the sunset light. I called my uncle at the military base. "Uncle Joe, I've changed grooms. Don't give my marriage documents to Andrew Sullivan." I explained the whole situation to him. He was so furious he slammed the table on the other end of the line. The marriage paperwork had been filed with the military. The plan had been to finalize everything after the banquet and register the marriage with the unit. In my past life, Something had come up at the base, and we didn't get around to registering until 3 months after the wedding. In rural areas, people didn't put much importance on the actual marriage certificate anyway. In the countryside, everyone agreed that once the wedding banquet was held, the couple was as good as married. Nathan Foster had been smiling nonstop from start to finish, grinning like a happy fool. I still remembered how, on the day of my previous life's wedding banquet with Andrew Sullivan, he hadn't cracked a single smile. My mom had been so upset she wiped away tears in secret. Nathan walked me back to my house. Just as we arrived at the gate, his smile faded suddenly. "Claire, are you serious? Or do you just want me to help you get back at Andrew?" he asked. "If this is just to spite him, I'll bring the dowry back to you in a few days. I'll help you, no problem." I stepped forward and grabbed his hand, feeling the sweat in his palm. "I'm serious," I said. "From now on, call me Claire." Then I gave him a quick kiss on the cheek and ran back inside, leaving him standing there with his ears red, touching the side of his face. He pushed the bike home, still in a daze, while I entered the house grinning from ear to ear. But my smile vanished the moment I saw Andrew sitting in my living room. He rushed toward me and grabbed my arm. "Claire," he barked, "how can you make such a mess of something as important as a wedding?" I tried to shake him off, but he only gripped tighter. My dad stepped in right away, shoving him hard in the shoulder. "You called off the engagement, Andrew. Don't you dare lay hands on my daughter. If you've got something to say, sit down and say it properly." Andrew let go, but was still seething. "Why are you doing this?" he demanded. "You're marrying a nobody. You'd rather marry a cripple than a soldier?" "Yes," I said calmly. "I'd rather marry a cripple than marry you." My dad's face darkened. "Andrew," he said, "after all these years, I never expected you to be this kind of man. You didn't even show up to collect the dowry, and now you think you have the right to question my daughter?" Andrew clearly thought being a company commander in the army made him untouchable. He looked down on others just because of his rank. At that moment, I truly found him laughable. "I had an urgent matter to deal with today," he tried to explain. "Oh, really?" I snapped. "What urgent matter could you possibly have at my uncle's house, contributing to the continuation of the human race?" Andrew's face turned ghostly pale. How can you say such things?" But his panicked eyes, darting around, already told my dad everything he needed to know. Dad scoffed. "Tomorrow I'll ask the matchmaker to return your bride price. After that, our families won't have any ties. Let's never see each other again." Andrew finally panicked. Up until now, he thought I was just trying to scare him. He had assumed that after chasing him for 4 years, I couldn't possibly leave him. "Claire, it's not what you think. Please let me explain." "Go ahead," I said coldly. "Tell me what exactly you were doing at my uncle's house today. What's so important over there?" He wanted to lie and say he hadn't gone there, but the conviction in my voice made him hesitate. He didn't dare deny it outright. He tried to resist the truth, because he knew just how much influence my uncle had in the military and how helpful that would be for his career. But eventually, my brother pushed him out the gate, and he stumbled out, speechless. Early the next morning, I stood in the courtyard still feeling like everything was surreal, not yet fully used to the joy of being reborn. There was a loud knock at the glass door, followed by the sound of lively chatter. I opened the gate and found a crowd of people gathered. Nathan was in the middle, and behind him, 4 men were carrying 2 large red chests. Well, one of the women joked. "Now that's a proper son-in-law. He's here with the betrothal gifts." The aunts and neighbors started buzzing with excitement. My parents and brother rushed out from the house. The 2 red chests were carried into the courtyard amid cheers. "Open them, let's see what's inside," someone shouted. "Yeah, open them," others chimed in. "Let's compare what Nathan brought to what Andrew gave. We'll see who's more sincere." I knew that Nathan's family had once been stripped of everything during the land reforms. They probably didn't have anything particularly valuable, and even if they did, they wouldn't dare show it off in public. I politely declined the request to open the chests. "Who opens betrothal gifts for inspection like that?" I said. "I'm not stupid." Eventually, the crowd dispersed. The chests were brought into the house, and Nathan handed me the keys. I quietly put them away. I saw the disappointment in Nathan's eyes. I leaned in and explained quietly, "We can't open the boxes today. My family is dividing the household. If people see what's inside, they'll start eyeing it." His eyes brightened with understanding. After Nathan left, Grandpa indeed gave the order. He asked my Uncle Daniel to go fetch the village chief. Uncle Daniel was visibly excited. He could hardly wait and ran off to the chief's house. Grandma rushed out too. I was certain she was going to get Uncle Mike. Everyone gathered soon after, even many curious villagers. Grandpa was the first to speak. "We've decided to divide the household today. Sorry to trouble you, Mr. Mayor, but we'd like your help to witness it. Mike, you moved out years ago after getting married. Today's division has nothing to do with you. Just stand aside and observe." Grandma immediately protested. "Why shouldn't Mike be included? He's family. Everyone should get a share when splitting things. You're just a biased stepfather." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. Everyone knew Uncle Mike had already received his share long ago. One of the aunts couldn't stay quiet. "Come on, Kim. How many times does your son want to take from the Sullivan family? Once wasn't enough? You think he's entitled to a second round of division?" "Exactly. He was fed and raised by this family," another woman said. "And now he wants more? That's just shameless. He's like a leech," someone else added. The villagers' voices buzzed with disapproval. Grandpa's face turned grim. He was clearly disheartened. "Fine," he said coldly. "If you want another share, return everything you got the first time around, and pay back the support we've given you over the years." But Grandma, true to her nature, went into full drama mode. She sat on the ground, slapping her thighs and howling. The village chief snapped, "That's enough, Kim. You gave birth to both of them. Stop being so blatantly biased." Grandma glared but finally got up, brushed the dirt from her clothes and hissed, "Fine. We won't split the stuff, but when Melissa gets married, there won't be a dowry like Claire's. Leave Claire's wedding gifts for Melissa." The words were so absurd I spat in disgust. "My uncles pooled their money for my dowry. Did you pay a cent? Let Melissa's uncles do the same for her." My mom trembled with rage this time, and for once, she spoke up for herself. My dad kept his head down, but I saw his clenched fists shaking with anger. "You shameless woman!" Grandma shouted and reached out to hit my mom, but Grandpa smacked his pipe right onto Grandma's hand. She shrieked and burst into loud sobs. "Kim, I never thought you'd stoop so low. I'm not dividing anything anymore. I want a divorce." That stunned everyone. Even Grandma went quiet, wide-eyed. The villagers were all openly criticizing her now. Melissa stood there with tears in her eyes, trying to look pitiful. "Grandpa, I'm your granddaughter too. Claire and I are sisters. You gave her such a big dowry. What about me? What will I do when it's my turn?" Grandpa's beard trembled with fury. "What does your marriage have to do with Claire's? Your maternal grandparents are gone. Was it my idea for your grandpa to be a traitor?" My dad exploded this time too. Aunt Judy, Uncle Mike's wife, lowered her head in shame and started crying. Melissa bit her lip, her eyes filled with hatred. Clutching his chest, Grandpa cast a long, heavy look at Melissa before turning to the village chief. "I want to cut ties with Mike's family. From now on, we're done. I want no part in their life, death, sickness, or anything else. Let him take care of his own mother." "I want to cut ties too," my dad said firmly. "And so do I," added Uncle Daniel, stepping forward. Uncle Mike looked stunned. He had never imagined that the two younger brothers, who had spent their entire lives giving in to him, would now stand against him and sever ties. I supported their decision wholeheartedly. In my past life, when Grandpa fell seriously ill, Grandma didn't lift a finger. Uncle Mike didn't pay a dime. It was my mom and Aunt Susan who took care of Grandpa until the end. But of course, Grandma wasn't done. "Then I'll go live with Daniel. He's my son too. Why should only Mike have to support me in old age?" Grandpa sneered coldly. "Mike's been married for over 20 years and hasn't handed over a single cent to this family. Meanwhile, Daniel and your father have supported us for just as long. If anyone deserves a break, it's them." Grandma had no response. Uncle Mike and his family, of course, were unwilling to accept this. Aunt Judy, with her poor background, knew very well that if it hadn't been for Grandpa and the Sullivan family name, they wouldn't have had an easy life in the village at all. "Dad," Uncle Mike pleaded tearfully, "we don't want anything from the family. Just please don't cut ties with us. I haven't fulfilled my duty as a son yet." He cried like a child who'd just been abandoned. "Dad, I'm still your son." Aunt Judy dropped to her knees beside him. But Grandpa was a stubborn man. Once he made up his mind, no one could sway him. "I have my own children and grandchildren," he said. "I don't need you to repay anything. Raising you was already more than enough. I've done my part." The village chief, who was also a Shen and distantly related to us, naturally supported Grandpa's decision. Grandpa made it official. "Mike Sullivan, you were brought into the Shen family by your mother. We raised you, helped you marry and raise your kids. You'll give me 100 yuan. That will settle the debt of your upbringing. From this day forward, whatever happens to you, birth, death, sickness, anything, it's no longer the Shen family's concern." Uncle Mike almost collapsed onto the ground. But no matter how much he resisted, it didn't matter. In the village, the chief's word was law. In the end, under the village chief's mediation, our household assets were divided 4 ways. 1 share for Grandpa and Grandma together, 1 for Uncle Daniel, 1 for my father, and 1 for Grandma's share. It was a bizarre arrangement, but it worked. All the property and valuables were split evenly. But we only had 3 rooms. Uncle Daniel and my dad each got 1. Grandpa gave Grandma 100 yuan in place of a house, and she moved in with Uncle Mike as compensation. That same 100 yuan also offset what Uncle Mike still owed Grandpa from years past. In our village, after a family split, it was customary to provide a monthly stipend of 5 yuan to support the elders. It would be split between the 2 of them, 2.5 yuan per person, per month. Grandma was stunned. She had grown used to my dad and Uncle Daniel handing over 50 or 60 yuan each month. Both were skilled carpenters and earned decent money. Now she was stuck. She had no way out. That very day, she was packed up and sent to Uncle Mike's home. That evening, I opened the dowry chests Nathan had sent. I was absolutely shocked. I hadn't expected him to be this bold, to give me so many valuable things. Thank goodness I hadn't opened the boxes in public earlier, or someone would have definitely reported us. Inside was a pair of gold bracelets, 2 thick cotton quilts, 2 bolts of fabric, a wristwatch, a radio, and a pair of exquisite jade swallows. One look, and I could tell those jade pieces weren't cheap fakes. Beneath everything was a bank deposit slip, 2,000 yuan. That was the difference between respect and neglect. I truly hadn't expected Nathan to have so much money. As for Andrew Sullivan, the dowry he'd sent was returned by the matchmaker. 2 thin quilts, 1 set of pillowcases, 2 towels, 2 ceramic basins, and a 50 yuan bride price. Later, I discussed with Nathan whether we could give Grandpa the radio from my dowry. Without hesitation, he agreed. In my previous life, I'd wanted to gift Grandpa the radio too, but Andrew wouldn't allow it. Then, mysteriously, the radio disappeared. I searched everywhere and never found it again. This time, I placed the radio directly in Grandpa's hands. He tried to refuse. "How can I accept your wedding gift?" he said. "Take it back." "I have 2. I replied. "What would I do with both? And besides, electronics break if you don't use them." He chuckled and finally accepted it. Grandpa could be petty too. After that, he took the radio out to the front gate every day, playing it proudly while a crowd of older folks gathered around him. On the day of the wedding, I woke up early to put on my bridal makeup. The bright red dress was eye-catching and festive. Looking into the mirror, seeing a face untouched by hardship, I couldn't quite describe what I felt. The truth was, I'd been cheated out of so much in my past life. Even though part of me still couldn't let go of the resentment of raising someone else's child, I believed firmly that heaven had set me back to make things right, that good and evil would eventually reap their due. I couldn't waste my time chasing revenge. Everything had its timing, and destiny would sort itself out. My focus now was to care for my parents and live a good life. I climbed onto the bicycle, and Nathan Foster rode me once around the village. A pack of excited kids followed behind us, chasing and laughing until we arrived at the Foster family's front door. That's when I saw Andrew Sullivan standing there, his military uniform wrinkled, hair greasy, face unshaven. He tried to approach me, but Melissa grabbed him from behind and stopped him. Later, after I'd changed clothes, I went to the courtyard with Nathan to serve wine and toast our guests. I didn't see anyone from the Sullivan family, but Melissa was still around. I leaned close to her and said quietly, "I wish you and Andrew a long life together. But you'll never be able to stand in the light. No matter who Andrew marries, your name will never appear on that marriage certificate." Melissa's hands clenched into fists, trembling with rage. I smiled faintly and walked away. Nathan carried me into the bridal room. His tall, broad frame pushed open the wooden door decorated with double happiness characters. Red dates and peanuts from the enamel basin spilled across the floor. His olive green shirt was soaked in sweat. He held me steady and gently. As he bent down, his chin brushed over the top of my head, and his stubble tickled my scalp. Laughter and teasing erupted from the main hall. "Time to mess with the bride and groom," Aunt Susan shouted, loud enough to shake the rafters. I clutched the front of Nathan's shirt tightly. "Kiss her! Kiss her!" someone in the crowd chanted. He leaned in and gently kissed me. His lips were soft and my cheeks instantly burned. After a while, the guests left and the house finally quieted down. Nathan tucked a stray lock of hair behind my ear and whispered, "Claire, this isn't a dream, right?" I didn't answer him with words. I used action. That night, Nathan was patient, gentle, and careful. Everything between us flowed naturally, like it was meant to be. After living two lives, it wasn't until that moment that I fully realized just how much I had lost in my previous one. 3 days later, we returned to visit my parents. Just like in my past life, Andrew was recalled to the army the day after my wedding. Nathan and I went together to register our marriage and take our wedding photo. Nathan traveled into the city every day. I didn't know exactly what he was doing, but each time he brought back a generous amount of money. I continued working at the hospital, and I knew that in just over a year, college entrance exams would resume. Whenever we had free time, we studied together. A month later, Andrew came back. I found out the village chief's daughter, Lillian Cox, had taken a liking to him. Mrs. Sullivan was already showing off around the village again. I made a phone call to Uncle Joe, asking him to expedite Andrew's marriage registration paperwork. Andrew's wedding was rushed. He got engaged and held the banquet within just 1 week. Probably only I knew why. Melissa disappeared again. It was obvious Andrew had hidden her away to let her quietly carry his child. 3 months later, I became pregnant. Nathan treated me with so much care and attention. He cooked nutritious meals for me every day himself. In my past life, when I was pregnant, I was still serving Andrew's whole family. Looking back, Andrew probably spent all his money on Melissa. I never saw a dime of his when I was carrying his child. Now, Andrew kept coming back to the village, sometimes several times a month. That was because Lillian kept calling his unit non-stop. But this time, Andrew couldn't lie or stall. Lillian hadn't gotten pregnant, not even once. I secretly wrote a letter to her father, the village chief, telling him that his so-called wonderful son-in-law had another woman on the side. At first, he didn't believe it, but then he started to investigate in secret. And sure enough, he found out about Melissa. What surprised me was that instead of confronting Andrew, they chose to do nothing. Lillian stopped nagging him altogether. I couldn't make sense of it. I was a neurosurgeon, but during a routine gynecology checkup, I saw Lillian at the hospital. A colleague of mine showed me her file. It turned out she had once had an abortion that left her infertile. I sat in my office, tapping my fingers against the desk, finally understanding why they were tolerating Melissa having Andrew's child. When I was 8 months pregnant, a major piece of gossip exploded across the village. Lillian Cox had found Melissa, who was living near Andrew's military unit. When Melissa's baby had just turned 1 month old, Lillian Cox took the baby and stormed to the military unit, demanding an explanation from the leadership. As a result, Andrew Sullivan was officially disciplined and forced into early retirement with no job assignment. The unit had discovered his improper relationship. Worse, it was with the descendant of a known traitor. Andrew returned to the village, and so did Melissa. Holding the baby in her arms, she went back to her parents' home. Since Grandma had moved in with Uncle Mike's family, she was now living in Melissa's old room. Though Aunt Judy clearly favored sons, when it came to choosing between her mother-in-law and her daughter, she stood firmly with her daughter. Besides, Grandma was no longer in a position to hand out money like she used to. 5 yuan a month wouldn't get her far. Aunt Judy walled off part of the pigsty with mud bricks and told Grandma to move in. Her so-called filial son Mike did absolutely nothing to help. Occasionally, Aunt Judy would throw her some leftover scraps, but most of the time, Grandma went hungry. Once, she sneaked back to our house and saw Grandpa lounging in a new outfit I had just bought him, sitting in a rocking chair and happily listening to the radio. Her eyes went red with envy. She accused my dad and Uncle Daniel. "Aren't I your birth mother? Why don't you care about me?" Uncle Daniel stayed calm. "Mom, you should remember how you treated us. When I was 6, I had to climb the mountain to collect firewood, and when I came back, I still had to wash clothes for my 11-year-old brother." Grandma started crying. She regretted it. But regret didn't change anything. My mom and Aunt Susan couldn't take it anymore and kicked her out for good. As for Andrew, Lillian kept him under tight control. He couldn't get anywhere near Melissa, and he didn't have any money left to support her either. Melissa stayed at her parents' house for half a year before sister-in-law Tang kicked her out. With nowhere else to go, she knelt outside Andrew's house, clutching her child. Surprisingly, Lillian accepted her and allowed her to move into the Sullivan household, but the child was frail and often sick. Whenever the baby got ill, Lillian wouldn't allow a hospital visit. "He's not dying, the clinic's too far." Who takes a kid to the hospital every time they sneeze? He'll grow out of it. Andrew didn't dare argue. Lillian's 4 brothers had already beaten him up once. He didn't dare act out again. Andrew's life became a bureaucratic nightmare. Everywhere he went, he needed official letters of introduction. In my previous life, he'd used his military connections repeatedly to get those letters for Melissa, allowing her to live near him on base. But in this life, Melissa couldn't go anywhere. The village chief wanted nothing to do with her. She was stuck in the Sullivan house, barely scraping by under Lillian's watchful eye. Lillian beat her frequently. If she got mad, she hit the child too. Eventually, Melissa snapped. She secretly poisoned Lillian with rat poison. Lillian died. Melissa was arrested. Andrew got one of his legs broken by Lillian's brothers. Their son, Shane, wandered the village like a beggar, sometimes convulsing on the ground from hunger or illness. In this life, I truly gave birth to a pair of healthy, beautiful twins, a boy and a girl. They were sweet, obedient, and strong. I got into the military medical university. Nathan Foster was accepted into the military academy. When we returned home for the new year with our children, we saw Shane fighting a stray dog for food. He saw me and suddenly cried out, "Mom." I smiled gently. "You're not worthy of calling me that."